Okay. Hi everybody. I'm Casey Donnellan, and I'm gonna do the next talk, I guess. So, oh, well, you might want to hear what I have to say before you. Uh, I might be terrible. Yeah. So this is called "Make It Work," game designers. Just full disclosure, I guess. I know that's like Tim Gunn, like a Project Runway thing. I've not really seen that show, so I assume I like have the reference right, but uh, maybe that's like so long ago you guys don't even know what it is, though. I don't know. Um, so yeah, it's about constraints, creativity, and basically just making the best game with what you have on hand. So this is really for like independent game developers, or just any game developer, or just like anybody with a large project. Um, Maybe not even a game. You might find this relevant. And you might also find yourself wondering during this talk, this is just like common sense. Uh, that's certainly like the thought I had as I was writing these slides, but I think it's not. I think that it's like you have to really be disciplined about thinking about this stuff because it's so easy to ignore it and really get yourself into trouble. And we'll get into that. So I've been thinking of this as like a framework for evaluating really large projects and trying to like wrap your head around that. So there's two parts: identifying your constraints and then working within your constraints. So let's talk about part one: identifying your constraints. So like the kind of main bullet points here: why do I need to do that? And then like figuring out what they are. And then we're going to talk about learning and how it's dangerous. Probably didn't think you would hear that. Uh, so I'm going to give an analogy here. So imagine, you're in like a classic sitcom and your parents went out of town and you decided to throw a really big party in your house. Classic. Everybody shows up and they totally trash the place. And it's the next morning, and oh shit, I've got 30 minutes to clean this house up before they get back, or I am in a lot of trouble. So if you're in that situation and you have 30 minutes, you don't go like clean the oven, you know? Uh, you're like, we're all able to kind of like intuitively wrap our heads around, like, okay, let me get all the beer bottles out of here first, and then I'll put like all the furniture back where it's supposed to go, uh, and then I'll like, I don't know, you can like kind of break it down intuitively to understand what the most important things are, so that on minute 29 you're not still there scrubbing the oven while the rest of the house is totally demolished. But in game development, you can totally like fool yourself into doing something like that, where you spend the first like several months of a project working on something that like maybe isn't that important. It's like kind of a classic mistake to make. Um, so so yeah, like in order to understand your constraints, um, well, we'll get into exactly how you do it, but like the reason you need to do that is because like in the analogy, you don't have uh, unlimited amounts of time. In the real world, you have only a short amount of time and only a small amount of money. And that's true even if you are like super wealthy, like James Cameron made Avatar 2. He spent $1 billion on it. He would have spent $2 billion if they had let him. Like creative projects can take unlimited amounts of time and money if you let them. So really coming to grips with like the scope of what you can actually do is pivotal. And um, it is so easy to just be like so vastly wrong about what that is um, because it's such a complicated project. Even a small game is a very complicated project. You could be off by a factor of 10. Like, it's not that crazy. It happens all the time. It happens to big companies of people who should absolutely know better all the time. You hear about games getting delayed again and again and again. It's because they're making these mistakes. Of course, the larger the project is, like the more uh, the easier it is to get into a situation like this, and the less experienced you are, also the easier it is to get into a situation like this. Um, so how do we like categorize these things? Your constraints, like what are your constraints really? So I have been thinking about them in kind of three categories: your capabilities, your resources, and the last one, money slash time slash risk. These are all kind of like three sides of the same coin. So your capabilities is what we'll talk about first. This is probably the most difficult, at least for like, I'm guessing where most of you guys are, maybe the most difficult for you to really um, get a firm grasp on, because you haven't really tried making that many games. You've all probably tried making some games, but until you've like done it over and over and over again, it's really hard to understand like what what can I do actually. Um, and you may get it wrong in either direction. I guess you may feel like I can't actually do anything. Or personally, I tend to get it wrong the other way, where I think that I can do way more than I can actually do, and I think probably that's uh, where most people would tend to fall. I guess it's like we're gonna make this game that's actually like way bigger than what we're capable of. So I think you know it's usually you're gonna fall into one of those two, and really just like the only way to get a better handle on it is to keep making more games and try to figure out like exactly what you're capable of. So that's capabilities. The next thing is resources. So this is just like the stuff you have at your fingertips. So software like Unity, Unreal Engine, Photoshop, or whatever it is you use. Uh, Thing is though, like you have to also know how to use it for it to really count in your column. The next thing is like assets. So like the Unity Asset Store, the Unreal Marketplace, sound libraries, animation libraries, things you can just like go spend a little bit of money and get a whole bunch of stuff that you can use for your game. So that's assets, and then plugins, libraries. It's kind of like assets. Like, is there some maybe proprietary thing you can get that will like allow you to add multiplayer to your game really easily, for instance, or like this package of software is going to let me like fracture objects, and we're going to use that in the game somehow. So this is all of your resources, and then the last one is probably the easiest to understand, maybe the hardest to accept, is your money slash time slash risk. So um, you know, probably not a lot of you have like tons and tons of money to throw at a project, but you do have your time, um, and that has a value. And you have to kind of weigh that against a realistic outcome of your game. So like kind of a good example, or an example like I like to think about, is Stardew Valley. Like the dude that made Stardew Valley took like 7 years to make it, and awesome game. Like it's really successful. I'm sure he feels like very vindicated in like taking 7 years to make one game, but like there's a world where like Stardew Valley wasn't a success, and that guy just like wasted 7 years. Um, I mean that's probably a little harsh, but but I mean there's like that's like not a it's not a crazy story that like an independent game developer would put years and years into a project and just kind of have it come to nothing. I mean, you have to put some time in, and so you have to like weigh what that time means to you against a realistic outcome for the project. And a realistic outcome is not Stardew Valley. Like Stardew Valley was a smash success. You have to look at like, well, what is like a mediocre, like what is a modest success for what I'm looking at here? Because the chances are that that's probably what you're going to end up with. And if you are um, kind of working towards that with how you're framing your constraints and everything, then uh, you're more likely to have at least a positive outcome rather than feeling like this whole thing was a failure. Um, so the other thing that you can use both money and time for is to solve problems that lie outside of your capabilities and resources. So there's two ways of doing that. One is to hire other people, um, which is often very expensive. So you have to be super selective about how you're going to do that for the best results. The other way to do it is by learning how to do some of that stuff yourself. So then that's part of your capabilities. Um, However, learning is dangerous. So like for me as an independent developer, like a solo developer, it's just like whatever effort I put into the project every day is is whether or not it moves forward that day. And so if I decide I'm going to stop for a week to learn how to do this thing, um, that's a week that, I mean, that's like a week that the game gets delayed, basically. Um, and, you know, there's a strong argument to be made that, like, well, but maybe you'll learn something that'll let you save a week later. Or maybe you'll learn something that'll make the game that much better, and then it'll be worth delaying it for a week. And uh, maybe, like it's often worked out in that case, in that those situations, like, but also maybe not. So it's just there's just like a risk to it. Like you might spend a week trying to learn something, but it turns out that like what you learned was that in order to really do this, you actually need to spend like 3 months learning it. Um, in which case you've kind of burned a week. Uh, or you might learn that the thing that you're trying to learn isn't really going to help you that much after all. So it's just kind of like, uh, a risky proposition whether you're going to like lay the project down and like learn a whole new capability. So I like to do it very deliberately. Like when I'm planning out a project, I, you know, try to identify like, oh, I'm going to do this thing, but I don't actually know how to do that thing, and I'm hiring someone to do it just isn't realistic. So like, uh, I'm gonna I'm gonna say I'm gonna spend a week doing it, and if I don't have it by the end of the week, then the contingency plan goes into effect, which is maybe that doesn't go into the game like that. Maybe that just like doesn't make it, or maybe there's a different way of doing it that's a little bit worse. But uh, so I think it's really important to think about it in a really detached way like that, so that after a week you're just like, well, fuck it, I'm gonna just spend another week doing it. Like you can't be that stubborn about it. So the other side of it is like you also can't just like not learn anything new. John, during your talk, I heard you guys say this of like you learning new things all the time. Yeah, like of course, I've been a game developer for like more than 10 years now, and like a lot of the stuff that I use now, I had never even heard of when I started. It had not been created when I started. So like if you aren't constantly learning new stuff, you will get left behind by everyone else. And there's just like cool new stuff that comes up all the time that if you want to use it, then you like better put the time in so that you know how to use it. But some of them might turn out to be duds, so you just have to plan around it. Which you guys are in school right now, you should like learn everything you can. I'm not saying skip class, but when you're doing this like full time and like the game has to make money in order for you to like pay your rent, then you have to start thinking about it in like a much more objective way. So that's like identifying your constraints. Part two is working within your constraints. So I think this is the easy part. So these are kind of the main bullet points here. Stop thinking about what you want. I have a silly Venn diagram to show everyone. Play to your strengths, stay flexible, and then a word about bad ideas. So stop thinking about what you want. Um, so this is like some Jedi shit, I guess. Emotions can cloud your judgment. So there's this idea of like a dream game. Like this is this like game idea that I've had it since I was a kid, and now I'm gonna grow up and make it, and it's awesome. And those types of ideas are just like so dangerous and insidious because um, they will just always mean so much more to you than they will to everyone else, and you really are going to have a hard time thinking about them like as logically as you need to. So uh, I think that in order to, best results, greatest chance of having success, you need to stop thinking about what you want to make and just focus on what you can make. Um, and just kind of know that there is I guess if you find that this isn't true for you, then maybe you're like in the wrong field entirely. But there is joy to be found in any creative project, like any kind of creative endeavor. Um, Once you're in it, you're going to enjoy it most likely. Because creativity is like its own end, I think. So I find that that's true for me. And I would imagine that it's true for just about anyone that's involved in building these kind of creative projects. So here's my Venn diagram here to kind of demonstrate this. So the very large orange circle is like all possible games, all games that could ever be made by anyone, by any team of any size, whether it's a good idea or not. The green circle is like games might actually have an audience. So you'll notice though, most games actually don't fall into that category for good reason. And then the kind of bluish one is the games that you can actually make. This might be actually a lot smaller than that. It really should be a lot smaller than that. But you'll notice that it doesn't really overlap with the games that people want that much. At least, like for me, it doesn't. If you really are like honest with yourself, there's things that you're interested in that like maybe nobody else cares that much, or maybe like not very many other people not very many other people care about, not enough to make it a successful product. So you've got to look for the overlap there. And then if you can, also a circle of games that you want to make. And so like the spot where those three intersect, I've labeled the sweet spot. But I think what's really worth paying attention to is these spots here, the danger zones, which is games you can make and you want to make, but like nobody else maybe really wants, and games you want to make, but and maybe people want that game, but you can't make it. So it's like not that hard to accidentally end up in one of those two danger zones. And then of course there's the boring zone, which is maybe you're not that interested in it, but you might also find that you become more interested in it over time. Thinking back to the joy to be found in any creative project. So play to your strengths. So this kind of like goes back to your capabilities and understanding what it is that you're good at. So for instance, if you are like a 2D artist, then maybe you shouldn't be trying to make a 3D MMO. Like that's probably not in your wheelhouse, I would guess. But like you could make maybe like a really killer Pokemon game where you draw all of the Pokemon if that's the kind of thing that you're good at. Um, so like you should be trying to look at um, choosing a game that like picks up as many of your skills as you can and doesn't have parts that are not in your skill set. Um, so use technology. So like, I mentioned Unity, Unreal. Well, those engines can do like all sorts of things, but they're really good at certain things. And combined with like particular plugins or libraries, things like that, they can be really, really good at doing those things. So rather than thinking about like, oh, I really want to make this, you think about like, oh, like Unreal, shit, it's like super easy to make a third person shooter in Unreal. Um, like maybe I should make a third person shooter in Unreal. I could do that. And then you start thinking about, okay, well, if I was going to make a third person shooter in Unreal, like what what would be a cool one of those? So that's kind of the direction I'm talking about coming from. Um, Another thing to think about is just like uh, as technology like marches along, it's there may be some opportunities there to uh, basically to make something that people aren't thinking about yet. So like I mentioned a third person shooter in Unreal. Maybe a better example would have been an open world game in Unreal. Like these engines are getting much better at making open world games. And but like most independent game developers are not thinking about making open world games because 5 or 10 years ago it would have been like super super hard to do that. So there's like an opportunity there. You can say like, oh, this technology can actually do this really cool thing that no one else is thinking about. Let me focus on what the technology can do and try to wrap a cool game around that, rather than just fixating on what it is that I want. Um, and then the same can be true for like buying assets from the marketplace. Like you might just like find something really cool. Uh, you might find something so cool on the Unity asset store that you're just like, I'm just going to make a whole game based on this. And uh, I didn't do a very good job of introducing myself. I made the game Kill It With Fire. So that's my like claim to fame, I guess. I've been in the industry for like a long time. Before that, working at Certain Affinity and then Rooster Teeth. But I made Kill It With Fire, and a lot of the art in that game is stuff from the Unreal Marketplace. It's like, um, and as I was going along, I was actually making a lot of my design decisions informed by what I could get from the Unreal Marketplace. Because I'm not a 3D artist. I'm more of a programmer, a full stack developer, I guess you might say. Uh, but I'm not going to 3D model something. So I would look through like, here's all the assets I have available to me. Like, oh, there's like uh, this cool looking thing. Like maybe I'll try to put that in the game. Maybe I'll build a new weapon around this. Maybe I'll build a game mechanic around this. And it is a different way of coming at a project, but you can kind of like, you know, get the rubber hitting the road faster, I think, doing that than trying to create something new, like from whole cloth. Uh, you know, it often takes so much longer to do that, and it's therefore more risky. So, um, one kind of caveat though to using Unreal Market stuff, Unity Asset Store stuff, is like, yeah, everybody has access to that. So like, um, you need to make sure that whatever you uh, choose things that like look congruent together. They look like they fit together, and um, make changes to it. Maybe you could use a post-process effect. Maybe you could use it in a way that people aren't expecting. And I'm not suggesting to like mask that that's what you're doing necessarily, because I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But particularly if there's like a key piece of art in your game, don't let it be the same thing that's in like 24 other, probably lower quality games. So just kind of be smart about it. So next up is stay flexible. So when you are building a game, I think that it's handy to think about like the shape of the game that you're building, which is kind of an abstract way of thinking about this, but I'll do another analogy here. So Journey, does everybody remember that game? Pretty famous. Versus like Factorio. They're both independent games, very awesome games. Journey, though, is like as an independent developer, if you were to take a year or 2 years and make Journey, that game is so much more risky to make than Factorio, because to add more value to it, your really only option is to just keep making the game longer, which is building more environments, writing more music, uh, adding more mechanics. It's just all of it just scales linearly. And also, just once the player has gotten to the end of it, then that's the game. And like Journey is an awesome game. It's a profound experience, but it's just it was a risky design, really from a different era too. Whereas like Factorio, it's a game where the shape of the design, uh, it's not a straight line. Like you can add more content anywhere into the like design space, and it enhances the game, gives players more things to do, might encourage someone to come back for another playthrough. So it is, I would say that as an independent developer, when you're thinking about just how your game works at this like super uh, high level, think about those two things, and you'll end up probably falling somewhere in between those, and that's okay. Um, but I think it's uh, you know, Journey is like it should probably be a little bit of a cautionary tale, I guess. And there's probably a lot of games that were like modeled after that people spent years working on that none of us have ever heard of, and it didn't work out for those people, which is a shame. So the next thing is to extend your systems. This kind of plays into the previous point, which is like uh, look at the systems, the gameplay systems, the code systems that you already have, and when you want to add something new, rather than thinking about what you want to add, think about what you could add. So Kill It With Fire uses it's an Unreal Engine. It has like this actor component system, and the weapons are they're all actors, but the things that the weapons can do are all components. So the components are kind of like attached to the actor, and there's things like ammo component that manages the ammo, ranged weapon component, melee weapon component, and you can kind of uh, like mix and match these components, let's call it, to come up with a new weapon. And you put a new model on there, and you put some new sound effects on there, and you've made new functionality out of systems that you've already built. Or you might say like, okay, well, I've got this ranged weapon component. Like if I change just like a little part of it, I can make this component do all of these new things, rather than trying to make a whole new component to do those things from scratch. So just another way of looking at of saying like, look at what you already have before you start making things up from scratch. So cultivate content. So these are like classic game development shenanigans. when done poorly, people might label this as like padding out your game, but when done well, you just have more game and no one thinks about it. So variance. This is like you've got you got the enemy ninja. He's red, but now you got a blue one. And he's got twice as much health and he can do an uppercut, or whatever. Or like if that example sounds kind of lame, well, like think about Destiny. Like Destiny is a game that's just about variants, guns. They have like hundreds, maybe thousands of weapons at this point that are just like variants of each other, and they have taken that and run with it basically as far as it can go, and made a huge business around it. So another example is like remixing. So a good example of this is in like Mario Odyssey or even Mario 64 for that matter. There's get the eight red coins. But that's not just on one level. They put that on every level. And you don't mind it because it like the coins are in different locations and it kind of forces you to engage with each level in a whole new way. But you're just kind of repeating the same thing over and over again. So like there's good opportunities to like maybe take an objective or a mission or something that you've already made and have players do it again, but just put it in a totally new setting that changes it in like a significant way. If it doesn't change it in a significant way, then you're just like padding your game. Progression mechanics. This one's really popular these days of like adding in some kind of thing where you get XP and then you spend it on skills, or you got to upgrade your weapons and upgrade your armor. These are systems that are just like not that hard to build. But it's just like one more like little loop to put in your game to keep people engaged. You can be really annoying about it, so don't do that. Or you can make this like the focus of your game, and there are games to do that, and it's really cool. And people know when they go in that this is what the game is about. So, just kind of one more tool in a tool belt. Achievements. This is just like I like achievements as a way of like highlighting things that you can do in the game that maybe people didn't even know about. Like there's a lot more like subtlety usually to your game than what the player is going to understand. And if you make an achievement that's like do this specific thing that like wasn't covered in the tutorial, then it's a way that like players that really just kind of like hanging out on your game, it's just like one more thing that they can engage with and they can understand your game on a little bit more of a deep level. And some people just are like crazy about achievements too. And collectibles are it's kind of the same thing, but like more geared towards like exploration, where they're going to more like fully engage with the environments that you've built. And you can all tie those things all together. You can make it so that you've got to get the collectibles to get forward on the progression, and then you got to get forward on the progression to get the next set of collectibles, and round and round you go. Working around problems. So a lot of times you like run into really difficult stuff when you're developing a game and you don't know how to get past it. It happens all the time. And sometimes the answer is to just like not fuck with it and just like like figure out a different way of doing it. Like sometimes it's not always an option. But I'll give an example on Kill It With Fire. So Kill It With Fire is a game where you hunt little like house spiders with this crazy variety of weapons and stuff. They're just like normal sized spiders, and when I was early days when I was working on it, I was like, oh, I want them to be able to climb around on everything because it's so creepy when spiders do that. And from a player psychology point of view, I want the spiders to be as creepy as possible so that you want to kill them as much as possible. Uh, and so it's wall crawling, but it's like wall crawling for like AI. And I didn't really understand how hard of a problem that was. It's a hard problem to solve in a way that is like truly it can apply to like everywhere in your environment. And I worked on it for a couple of weeks, probably longer than I should have, and just couldn't get it. And eventually, I was just like, I can't spend any more time on this. Like, what am I going to do? And I ended up making it so that spiders can just like bang into physics props. It doesn't make any sense. Like as a spider could like come and like knock this microphone. A spider in real life would not be heavy enough to do that. But it worked in the game, and like nobody ever knew that I was trying to make them climb all over stuff. There's like certain areas of the game where I have like ladders basically, where I've highlighted like, okay, the geometry here is perfect. Spider, you're gonna have no trouble getting up here. And they'll go for it there, but they won't try to just like if you just like toss something on the ground, they'll just knock it out of the way. Even something really big. So it's kind of a funny game, so it works. Another example, when I was developing Kill It With Fire, I mentioned I'm more of a programmer than an artist, and it's a first-person shooter. Most first-person shooters, you can see your character's hand and arm, and that involves a lot of like animation. It involves some rigging, this stuff I don't really know how to do, at least not that well. And I played around with like retargeting the skeleton a bunch and looked at it for a long time and just like couldn't figure it out after a certain amount of time. And so I ended up just saying, you know what? Fuck it, you just don't have arms. Like it's just like your weapons are just floating there, and it's fine. Like nobody cares. So those are examples of like working around problems, finding alternate solutions to problems that can cut out like enormous amounts of work. So what you shouldn't do is like hack something in, unless you like really, really have to. Like, there's no absolutes, I guess. So if it's like between, shipping your game or not, then yeah, I guess put some like really shitty hack in. But generally, like bad hacks are going to come back and bite you later. So the number of times where I Kill It With Fire shipped in 2020, and I was like doing some like updates afterwards, and every single update I put in some shitty hack because I was like, this is the last time I'm ever going to touch the game. So it doesn't matter, right? Like I'm going to do this update, and then I'm never going to look at this code again, and no biggie. And I have been wrong about that every single time. Like every single update, it turns out it wasn't the last update. And then I started working on Kill It With Fire 2. And like so it keeps going. So yeah, don't do shitty hacks unless somebody's got a gun on you. Your publisher's got a gun on you. So happy accidents. So this is just like as you're developing a game, weird stuff might happen. Crazy things might happen. Some people might call them bugs, but it might turn out that hey, that bug is actually kind of cool. Like maybe that's a feature instead. So just like stay open to that possibility. It's just going back to that. Don't think about what you want. Think about what you can do. And if you do something by accident that turns out to be cool, you did it. It was something you did. You didn't know you could have done that, but you did it. And now, like, you think about whether you want to keep it. So in Kill It With Fire, you have a clipboard that has all of your objectives on it in like a didactic way. And it was one of the early things I made. I first made some like melee weapons. You click and you swing them, and so I like copy paste that, change the model to a clipboard, and made a little like UI element to go over it. Got it in the game. Hey, it looks awesome. And then I accidentally clicked, and it swung the clipboard. Like I was not intending it to be a weapon, but as soon as I did it, because it was just copied and pasted from another melee weapon, as soon as that happened, I was like, that's actually pretty funny. That you can use the clipboard as a weapon. And it ended up kind of becoming like, I don't know, one of the like more core ideas of the game, that your clipboard is a weapon. Like one of the more like, I don't know, IP, central to the IP things. Um, and then, so the last thing about staying flexible is just like, you know, cut stuff. It's okay. Nobody knew that you're going to put that in the game. Nobody knew it was supposed to be multiplayer, and it turned out to be too hard. Uh, you know, it's okay. Um, if as long as you're in the kind of position where you have authority over that kind of stuff, I mean, that's the fastest way of getting done with your game faster, is to just like cut stuff out of it. I mean, you obviously can't go too far. You don't have any game left, but it'll when you get into it, you're gonna know. You're gonna know what you can cut and what you can't cut. Okay, so last slide, bad ideas. So kind of they usually come in two varieties. Ideas that are so cool that you just like it can't be done. Or like it could be done, but it would take so much money and so much time to do it that it would never sell enough copies to make it worth doing. The other side of that is just like, so these are the two danger zones from the Venn diagram. The other side of that is just like, yeah, like I could build this, but like no one would be interested in that. Like no one's interested in my like spreadsheet simulator game. Uh, so although they did make Eve, so maybe. But something to think about is that bad ideas can eventually become good ideas, through a couple of mechanisms. One is just like technology advances, and that game idea that would have been way too impractical to make turns out, because of how great Unity is now, I could actually make that. It's like, and I think Kill It With Fire is actually a really good example of that. Like, could someone in like the year 2000 have made Kill It With Fire? Yeah, like the Valve could have made it. They definitely could have made that game. It would have taken like 20 people, and it would have come out, and people would have been like, well, it would have come out in Walmart, and like people would have been like, what the hell is this? And so it wouldn't have made any sense. But now, because technology got so much better, and because the audience for games has changed so much, I was able to make that a successful product. So I was able to make it mostly by myself, and there is now an audience for it, or I was able to find the audience for it, whereas the only way you could sell games 20 years ago was like in a store, and it wouldn't have made sense to sell such a niche thing in a store. So things change over time, so it's just like never, totally forget about it. It might end up working out someday. And then last couple of points, so warning signs. So like stuff to kind of be looking for to see that maybe you're in the danger zone. The first one is fixation. I call it going down the rabbit hole, which is just like so laser focused on getting this one thing right that you're neglecting the rest of the game. And maybe what's really going on there is that you don't actually believe in the rest of the game, or you are too afraid to make the rest of it, afraid that you're not going to be able to do it. So if you find yourself like really like hyper focused on one thing, then you need to be like really honest with yourself uh, about what's going on there. The classic example of this is text boxes in like RPG games, where like somebody will start developing like a little RPG, and the like the scrolling text that comes up when you talk to characters, they'll end up spending like 2 months working on that, and it's like, yeah, like I got the fucking sweetest text boxes. Like this system is so good, it's so awesome, but then they just like haven't done anything else on the game, uh, and that's like that shit happens. It really does, and it could happen in like other areas too. So really be on the lookout for that, and then excessive learning, where you're just like you keep putting off actually making the game because you're like, okay, well, like, well, if I'm going to make this game, I need to know how to do this. I need to know how to like rig a character. I need to know how to make particle systems. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to take a week to learn how to do that. I'm going to take a month to learn how to do that. I'm going to take this class to learn how to do this. And you spend so much time learning how to do all of these various things, you have not gotten anywhere with your game. Um, and, you obviously need to know some stuff to make a game. But if you find yourself, you keep like putting off work because you think that you're gonna like pull in all this new knowledge, um, that's kind of a warning sign. You're never gonna learn so much that you're gonna be able to just like click a button that says make game and then it's made. Like it's still gonna be a lot of work to make the game. Um, and then the last thing when you're thinking about a game idea, evaluating it, is like it's just worth asking, am I even in the right medium here for my idea? Um, I think that particularly ideas that are like super heavy on story and setting, the you may just be like totally in love with this story. You need to ask yourself like, well, maybe I should just write a novel. Like maybe that's what I should be doing. Like, did it need to be a game? Is this really like the best use of doing this? Because it's like it'll take way more time to make it into a game. Like, should I be writing like a spec script for a show? Should this be a board game instead of a video game? Uh, those are like, really valid questions, I think. And if you just, it's like you got to hammer everything looks like a nail, right? It's like you're a game developer. Every idea you have is a game idea. Well, like maybe they shouldn't be, maybe they should be other things. So just being really honest with yourself in evaluating things through that lens. So yeah, that's the talk. You can find me on Twitter, although I don't really use Twitter anymore. But if you want to follow me on there, maybe someday when it gets better, I'll come back. You can email me, and you can play Kill It With Fire. It's on all the things, and it's coming to VR too. We just announced that this week. So. Any questions? Well, so the games that you can make, that's just for you though. Like the games people want, if you were to look at every game developer and every uh, studio and everything, that whole thing would be overlapped. But what you are capable of doing, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's somebody that can make every game. Probably not, but uh, what I feel like I'm capable of doing is just like a little sliver of the whole market. Any other questions? Yep. Um, so that's a long story, I guess, but they uh they shut down the entire Rooster Teeth Games team. Uh, and I was planning on going independent. I was kind of working towards the saving money to it's a good question because it's like maybe for a lot of people it's too risky, right? Like it but I when they shut down the whole team, everybody got like severance packages, which was nice. It like, kind of would keep me afloat for like a few months. Then I had more savings to keep me going for a little bit longer. And that was kind of the push out of the door, I guess I needed. But I would say in general, like, you know, I don't know, there's kind of I'm of two minds about it. Like you guys are, probably mostly younger. Your lives um are like the least complicated they're gonna get probably. Um, and so you can take more risk. You can you can live in some like cheap place and eat like ramen noodles and make a cool game if that's what you want to do. But as you get older, it's like you might have a partner, you might have a mortgage and a car payment and a baby. And so it like gets more and more complicated and harder to make that jump. But you also gain more and more experience. So finding that right place to make the jump is going to be different for everybody. Um, Definitely helps to have some money saved up. And most important is to have a very good plan, a very realistic plan, not just like, I'm going to make a game. It's like I had to go through shipping a whole bunch of like failed games and seeing why they failed to really understand like, um, it's like, okay, don't do these things, do these things. You'll have a pretty good shot. So back there. Oh, it's way safer to not do what I do. Yeah, for sure. Like I'm doing okay. Uh, but like, you know, there's probably it's like the Stardew Valley example. Like in an alternate dimension, there's a homeless version of Casey. So it's definitely way safer to go like work for a AAA company and like get a bunch of experience and have someone pay you to get all that experience. So that's why I said I'm kind of two minds about it because like um, when you don't have as many like dependencies and complexities and expenses, you can take a bigger risk and like something really cool might work out. It just keeps getting harder. So yeah, cool.